Hi, welcome back. We're here at Silver Lake, which is north of Seattle, and I'm going to be talking about focusing in these two videos. This first video we're going to go through focusing methods, autofocus methods, as well as manual focus. And then in the second video we're going to look at the really important concept of depth of field, which is a way of isolating your subject from the background, and really it's to do with how much of your scene's in focus. So starting off, we'll go through autofocus methods and then manual focus. Pretty much all lenses, DSLR lenses, come with an autofocus mode. So you have a switch here where you can switch between manual and autofocus. There are some dedicated lenses, professional lenses, that are manual only, but in most cases a kit lens and a lot of the professional lenses will have an autofocus mode. Now with the autofocus mode, there's various types of mode on the actual camera itself, and on this camera you access it here through an dedicated AF menu, which is autofocus menu. And the different kinds of modes that most cameras have will be a single shot mode, where it's when you press the button it'll choose an autofocus point just for that single shot and it'll take the shot. So it basically locks on once. It doesn't try to track or anything, it just locks on your object once. Then they have an AI focus one, which is kind of artificial intelligence. Basically it tries to calculate if your object's moving. If it's not, it'll just take a single lock on, otherwise it'll try use servo mode to follow it. And then they have a servo mode, which is autofocus servo, and that's like a tracking mode. So that way if your object's actually moving in your scene, it'll try keep a lock on. So it'll just constantly adjust the autofocus to try keep your subject in focus. So those are the three modes. Now in the camera itself, there's autofocus points that it uses to determine what point in your scene is going to be in focus. Now different cameras have different amounts of autofocus points, and there's a key difference between entry-level models and some of the more professional ones. And it's the entry-level models usually have only one cross-type point in the center, and that allows the camera to detect vertical or horizontal changes in contrast to lock onto. And the other focus points will only take contrast on one axis, so it doesn't lock on as quick. So for instance, if you have a scene where there's changes, an abrupt edge horizontally, it'll lock on fine, but vertically it won't. Whereas the cross-type points will lock on either way. So they're more advanced points, and the more professional models have more of them, so they can lock on things really quickly. What it is when you look through your viewfinder and you half press the shutter release button, then the autofocus points will activate if you've got autofocus on your lens. So the default for most cameras is where it'll use all the autofocus points, so that if you click on there, it'll basically jump to more or one autofocus point according to where your objects are. It'll try automatically detect which object you're interested in the scene, which is fine for like a quick shot where your subject distance is about the right distance. But in some instances that's going to get that wrong. And in fact, that's not my favorite way of using autofocus points. The other way is where you can actually half press, and then you press that. On this camera it has it there. It's this symbol that allows you to shift that autofocus point, and usually shift, and then you scroll, either the scroll button down there or at the top, the settings button, and you can either choose the center one, you can choose, or any of the other autofocus points, or all of them. So if you choose a particular autofocus point, like let's say we choose that top left-hand side one, it'll only use that to lock on. So if you know your subject's only going to be in the top left-hand sort of section of your image, then that's fine. You can just use that point. Now, my best method is to just use that center one. And the reasoning behind that is, especially on the entry-level cameras where you've only have that single cross-type point in the center, that's your most effective autofocus point. So you're better off using that more than the other ones, because it's going to lock on quicker in more situations. So when you're using just the center one, you don't always want your subject in the center of the image. Like I spoke about in the composition video, sometimes you want it on the golden means, which are just in from the thirds. So if you just use that center point, it's going to miss your subject. It's going to focus on something in the background. So what you do is you half press, you aim straight at your subject. Let's say I'm focusing something down there, I half press, and that's locked on that object now, and then I can reframe and fully press the shutter. So you want to keep that shutter button half pressed. So basically half press, it locks on, reframe and shoot. So that way you can actually focus on whatever you want and then reframe the image exactly as you want and then shoot. And that's the way I use it mostly. That's the way I mostly use autofocus. There is another way too where you can actually hit the AF on button on your camera too. That's another way of locking it without half pressing. So you can just look at your scene, half hit that AF and the focus stays the same. So if I focus on something real close like my hand, I hold that AF button down, reframe, hit it. But you do have to hold that button down. So it's another way. Instead of half pressing it, you can also just lock with the AF lock button. So that's how I use autofocus points, and I think that's the most effective. Now onto manual focus. Manual focus can be really useful if you have time to, get something in focus and then press the button. But sometimes it's hard to really see whether something's totally in focus, even through the viewfinder. It may look clear, but it may not be perfectly sharp. I use a hybrid method most of the time where I actually switch to autofocus and then using just that center point, lock on something and then switch to manual. So I know that whatever subject I'm interested that I've locked on, that's where the focus point is. So that's really useful if you can't really tell through the viewfinder if you've got a sharp focus. So you leave it up to the camera's ability to lock on, to lock your focus and then switch to manual, and then you know that that's always going to be in focus. So that's really handy. Now what's nice about some of the new DSLR models is you have a live mode. So instead of using the autofocus points through the lens, you hit the live button, and what that does is it gives you now a live scene update. You'll notice that in live mode there's actually a little box, and that shows you where your focus point is. So now when you lock on a scene, it'll lock on using that square, and then you can take the photo. But I find that really slow, and in the Canons are particularly slow, and Nikons might be a little improved over the Canons, and they actually allow you to track better. And with the live view mode, there's actually different autofocus modes too. There's just the live mode, which locks on with the square. There's face detect live mode, and there's AF quick mode. Now how AF quick mode it works is you have your scene framed. So what happens is as you press the button, is the mirror will flip down, it'll use the regular autofocus points, it'll focus and it'll flip back and put you back in live view mode. Because the way live view works is the mirror actually flips out the way when you're in live view. So when you look through the viewfinder, you don't see anything because that mirror is actually in the way of the prism system. So you're not looking through the lens, you're looking at what the sensor is seeing. So although the live view mode, regular autofocus on live view, is super slow, there is something that I really like about it, and that is the manual mode. So now this is where manual focus is really handy. And I use this in a lot of shots where I can put it on a tripod and I have time to set the focus point exactly as I want, like for a scenery shot or like some of the time-lapse videos that you'll see later on in the Gold members area. And how that works is you can have your scene framed like that, but now we set it to manual mode, which isn't that useful because you still don't have much of a view to see what's going on. But what that mode allows you to do is you can actually hit the zoom in button here, and you can go 3 times magnification or 10 times. And now that's showing you a real zoom view of what's going on. And that's super useful because now you're at 10 times magnification, you can get a really good focus on your object, and then you flip back to full view, and now you know that you've actually locked on that little portion of your scene. You know that that's accurately focused, and then you can take your shot. So that's a great way of combining manual focus with live view. So that's one of the most useful things I think of having live view focus mode, is actually just using it to zoom in and manually focus. So one of the things I mentioned in some of the preview videos for this series was I use manual focusing a lot, and that's that I tend to now use it with autofocus first, lock on at a certain distance, and then hit manual focus. And that's really good for those situations where you're waiting for a sudden event to happen, so the timing is unexpected but you kind of know where it is, and then you can have that manual focus ready, and then it's really quick. You're really not waiting for that autofocus to kick in before you take the photo. You can just take the photo instantly. Another way of improving your chances of getting your subject in focus, especially with manual focus, is to make sure you have a broader depth of field. In other words, more of your scene in focus. And that leads us straight into the next video. I'm going to show you what depth of field is and the 3 major settings that affect the depth of field. So jump into that video when you're ready and learn how to handle depth of field. Thank you.